The trade outpost of Gorin Station smelled like burnt metal and old oil, and Daniel Cole liked it that way. He had traveled 3 weeks on a cargo hauler just to reach this rusted ring of docks floating at the edge of nowhere, hired for one simple reason. The aliens who ran this place had heard stories about humans fixing things nobody else could fix. Whether those stories were true or not, Daniel was about to find out. He stepped off the hauler with a single bag of tools slung over his shoulder. The station's air was thick and humid, filtered through machines older than his grandfather. Around him, creatures of a dozen shapes moved through the corridors, hauling crates, arguing over prices, ignoring him completely. That suited him fine. He wasn't here to make friends. He was here to work. A tall insectoid alien met him at the gate, its 4 eyes blinking independently as it studied him. Its name, translated by the station's device clipped to Daniel's collar, was Rask. Rask did not look impressed. "You are the mechanic," Rask said, more statement than question. "Small, soft, no exoskeleton. Yet they say your kind repairs anything." "We try," Daniel said. "What have you got for me?" Rask made a clicking sound that Daniel guessed was something like a laugh. "Follow. I will show you a joke." They walked through winding corridors, past docking bays filled with broken shuttles and stacks of scrap metal. Daniel noted the state of the station as they went: patched hulls, flickering lights, systems held together with wire and hope. This was a place where things came to die, and someone tried to squeeze a little more use out of them before they were finally thrown away. Rask led him to a massive hangar at the far end of the station, easily 10 times the size of any other bay Daniel had seen so far. The doors groaned open, revealing a chamber lit by dim orange lights. In there, chained to the floor with thick cables and rusted clamps, lay something Daniel had never expected to see in his life. It was enormous, easily the length of 3 shuttles end to end. Its body was covered in overlapping plates, some clearly metal, others clearly organic, fused together in a way that made Daniel's mechanical brain ache trying to understand it. Long folded wings lay pressed against its sides, the joints twisted at unnatural angles. A long neck stretched out along the floor, ending in a massive head with closed eyes and rows of teeth, like broken machine parts. "A dragon," Rask said, almost bored. "Built long ago by a species that no longer exists. A living weapon, they called it. Now it is scrap. It has not moved in longer than anyone here has been alive. We keep it because taking it apart costs more credits than leaving it here." Daniel walked closer, ignoring Rask's warning click behind him. Up close, the size of the creature was overwhelming. Its plated skin was cold under his palm, but not completely cold. There was a strange, faint warmth beneath the surface, like an ember buried under ash. "It's dead," Rask said. "A machine that stopped working, wrapped in flesh that stopped living. Do not waste your time." Daniel crouched by one of the creature's massive front limbs, running his hand along a cracked plate. He noticed something the alien clearly had not: a soft, rhythmic pulse beneath the plate, so faint it could easily be mistaken for the hum of the station itself. He pressed his palm flat against the surface and waited. There it was again. Slow, weak, but steady. "It's not dead," Daniel said quietly. "It's asleep." Rask's eyes blinked in surprise, all 4 at once. "Impossible. Our scanners show no active systems." "Your scanners are looking for machine parts," Daniel said, standing up. "This isn't just a machine. It's alive too. You need both kinds of instruments to see both kinds of life, and I'm guessing nobody here has both." Rask said nothing for a long moment, clearly annoyed at being corrected by a creature it had assumed was inferior. Finally, it clicked its mandibles together. "Even if you are right, human, what does it matter? The creature cannot move. Its wings are ruined. Whatever pulse remains will fade eventually, same as it always does." Daniel looked up at the towering, silent shape of the dragon, taking in the size of the challenge in front of him. He had fixed broken ships, broken engines, broken machines of every kind across a dozen worlds. He had never fixed something that could also open its eyes and look back at him. "Give me a chance to look it over properly," Daniel said. "If there's nothing to be done, I'll tell you myself, and you can do what you want with it. But if there's even a small chance I can help it, I want to try." Rask studied him for a long moment, mandibles clicking in what might have been thought, or might have been amusement. "You humans and your stubbornness. Very well. You have 3 days before the disassembly crew arrives. Waste them if you wish." Daniel nodded, already rolling up his sleeves as Rask walked away, leaving him alone in the enormous hangar with the sleeping giant. He set his tool bag down beside the creature's massive head and looked into its closed eyes. 3 days, Daniel murmured to himself, more determined than worried. Let's see what we can do about that. Somewhere deep beneath the cold plates and tangled cables, in a place no scanner on the station could reach, something inside the dragon stirred just slightly, as if it had heard him. 3 days was not a lot of time, and Daniel knew at the moment he opened his tool bag. Fixing a shuttle engine was simple compared to this. He was staring at a creature the size of a small building, half machine and half something else entirely, with no manual, no blueprint, and no one on the station who understood how it actually worked. He started the way he always started, by looking, not touching. He walked the full length of the dragon's body, studying the way the metal plates connected to the flesh beneath them, tracing thick cables that ran along its spine like veins made of wire. Some of the cables were clearly meant to carry power. Others pulsed faintly, warm under his fingers, carrying something closer to a heartbeat than electricity. By midday, a small crowd of station workers had gathered near the hangar entrance, watching him with open curiosity. Word traveled fast in a place this small, and the idea of a human trying to fix the station's oldest piece of scrap was apparently good entertainment. Daniel ignored them and kept working, occasionally muttering to himself as he mapped out what he could see. He found the first real clue near the base of the creature's neck, where a cluster of thick cables converged into a metal housing the size of a small car. The housing was cracked open, its inside scorched and blackened. Wires hung loose, some of them clearly cut on purpose rather than broken by accident. Somebody did this deliberately, Daniel said aloud, running his fingers along the clean edges of the cut wires. This wasn't an accident. Somebody wanted this thing to stop working. A young Thren technician near the hangar entrance leaned in curiously. Unlike the others, she seemed less interested in mocking him and more interested in what he was doing. She had smaller mandibles than the others and eyes that seemed brighter, more alert. Her name tag, once Daniel's translator caught up, read Vera. You think someone crippled it on purpose? Vera asked. Looks that way, Daniel said. This housing controls signals running to the limbs, maybe the wings too. Somebody cut the connection here, right where it would be hardest to notice unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. Vera glanced nervously toward the hangar entrance, where Rask stood watching from a distance, arms crossed. The old records say dragons like this one were bred as weapons. Some say they were too dangerous to control, so their masters disabled them rather than risk losing control. Daniel nodded slowly, filing that information away. It made sense. A weapon too strong to fully trust was a weapon someone might cripple rather than destroy, keeping the power in reserve just in case, but making sure it could never turn against its makers. He spent the rest of the day working on the damaged housing, carefully clearing away burnt material and testing each wire for any sign of life. Most were dead, brittle, useless, but a few, buried deep inside the tangle, still carried a faint current. Those were the ones he focused on, tracing them back toward the dragon's skull with painstaking care. By evening, sweat soaked through his shirt and his hands ached from hours of careful work, but he had found what he was looking for. A single intact relay, buried deep in the housing, still faintly active. It was small, easy to miss, and clearly not meant to be found by whoever had disabled the creature originally. This might be the key, Daniel said, more to himself than to Vera, who had stayed by his side most of the afternoon despite clear disapproval from the other workers. If I can boost the signal through this relay, maybe I can wake up more of the system. He didn't have the right parts for a proper repair. Gorin Station didn't sell equipment built for creatures like this, because nothing else like this existed anywhere Daniel had ever heard of. Instead, he improvised, pulling wiring and connectors from an old shuttle engine parked nearby that Rask had said was beyond saving anyway. If it was already scrap, Daniel figured, no one would miss a few parts. Working by the dim orange light of the hangar, Daniel spliced human engineering into alien biology, connecting shuttle wiring to the ancient relay with careful, patient hands. It was slow, delicate work, the kind that left no room for mistakes. One wrong connection could fry what little was left of the creature's systems permanently. Hours passed. Vera eventually left, promising to return in the morning. The crowd at the hangar entrance thinned out as the station's day cycle wound down. Daniel worked alone, guided by nothing but instinct and the faint, steady pulse he had felt on the first day. Finally, near midnight by the station's clock, he made the last connection. He held his breath and gently activated the makeshift relay, sending a careful trickle of power through the ancient system. For a long moment, nothing happened. Daniel's shoulders slumped, disappointment creeping in after hours of work. Then, slowly, one massive eyelid on the dragon's head twitched. Daniel froze, watching closely. The eyelid twitched again, then slowly, painfully, began to open. A large, ancient eye emerged from beneath it, dull and unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as it turned, ever so slightly, toward Daniel. He stood completely still, heart pounding, as the dragon's eye focused directly on him for the first time in who knew how many years. It wasn't full consciousness. It wasn't movement. But it was something. "Hey there," Daniel whispered softly, careful not to make any sudden movements. "Nice to finally meet you." The eye held on him a moment longer before slowly closing again, exhausted by even that small effort. But Daniel had seen enough. Whatever this creature was, wherever it had come from, it was still in there. And for the first time since arriving on Goron Station, Daniel allowed himself a small, tired smile. News of the eye opening spread across Goron Station faster than Daniel expected. By the next morning, the hangar that had been quiet and mostly ignored for years suddenly had a small, but steady stream of visitors, all curious to see the human who had apparently woken up the station's oldest piece of scrap. Rask arrived early, standing at a careful distance from the dragon's head, arms crossed, clearly unwilling to admit he was impressed. The eye opened. That is not the same as fixing it. Do not let one small movement fool you into thinking you have accomplished something great. "I never said it was fixed," Daniel replied, not looking up from his work. "I said it's alive. There's a difference between fixing and proving something's worth saving." Rask made no comment, but he also didn't order Daniel to stop, which was as close to approval as Daniel expected to get from him. The days that followed became something like a routine. Daniel woke early, checked the relay connection he had built, and spent hours mapping out more of the dragon's damaged systems. Vera became a regular presence beside him, initially just curious, then increasingly helpful once Daniel realized she understood the station's old technical records better than anyone else on Goron. "There used to be more dragons," Vera told him one afternoon, sitting on an overturned crate near the creature's massive front leg while Daniel worked on a cluster of cables near its shoulder. The old records mention a whole squad of them, built by a species called the Havinar. They were wiped out generations ago in a war nobody living remembers clearly. This one is the last we know of. "What happened to the rest?" Daniel asked, not looking away from his work. "Destroyed, most likely. Or scrapped like this one was meant to be." Vera paused, glancing at the sleeping giant beside them. The records say dragons could sense emotion. Fear, calm, aggression, even affection. They responded to how their handlers felt, not just to commands. Daniel considered that for a moment, then set down his tools and looked up at the creature's massive head. If that was true, it explained a few things. The way the creature's pulse had steadied slightly whenever he spoke to it softly. The way its breathing had changed subtly whenever a loud group of onlookers gathered too close. From that point on, Daniel made a deliberate effort to stay calm around the dragon, keeping his voice low and steady even when frustration crept in during difficult repairs. He began talking to it regularly, more out of habit than expectation of any response, narrating his work as he went. "Okay, big guy, today we're looking at your left front leg. Somebody really did a number on the wiring here." The creature, of course, said nothing back, but its breathing remained calm and steady whenever Daniel spoke, and slowly, over the passing days, small changes began to appear. The dragon's head shifted slightly when Daniel entered the hangar each morning. Its nostrils flared gently when he approached, as if recognizing his scent. Once, when a group of loud station workers gathered too close, the creature let out a low, rumbling growl that sent them scattering, though it never opened its eyes. "It's protecting you," Vera said, watching the scene with wide eyes. "Or at least, it recognizes you as different from the rest of us." Daniel wasn't sure what to make of that, but he didn't dismiss it either. He had fixed enough broken machines in his life to know that sometimes trust mattered as much as technical skill. If this creature had spent generations locked away, betrayed by whoever built it, earning its trust might matter just as much as fixing its wiring. Weeks passed. Daniel gave up his temporary quarters on the station and began sleeping on a cot near the dragon's head instead, waking at odd hours to check on the relay system or simply to be present in case something changed. Vera brought him meals and old technical records, staying late most nights to help however she could, despite clear disapproval from some of the other Thran workers who thought the whole project a waste of resources. Slowly, painstakingly, Daniel expanded the dragon's active systems. He repaired damaged sensors along its neck, restored partial function to its jaw muscles, and reconnected several smaller relays throughout its body. Each small success brought a small reaction, an eye-opening fully, a low rumble of sound, a slight shift of its massive head toward Daniel's voice. But no matter what he fixed, the wings remained completely still. Daniel focused on this problem carefully, tracing every cable and connection he could find leading from the dragon's central nervous system toward the base of each wing. What he found troubled him more than anything he had discovered so far. Unlike the other damaged systems, which showed signs of neglect and decay over time, the wing connections showed something different entirely. They had been cut cleanly, deliberately, and permanently, not damaged by time or disuse, but destroyed on purpose, likely during the very same event that had first crippled the creature generations ago. Someone hadn't simply neglected the wings. Someone had made absolutely certain this creature would never fly again. "This is bad," Daniel muttered, running his fingers along the clean, precise cut marks near the base of one massive wing joint. Whoever did this really didn't want this thing taking off. Vera crouched beside him, studying the damage with growing concern. "Can it be fixed?" Daniel sat back on his heels, staring up at the enormous folded wing above him, thinking through everything he knew about biology, machinery, and the strange combination of both that made up this creature's body. The muscles beneath the wing's surface still felt firm and healthy under his palm, not withered or dead like he might have expected after so many years of disuse. "The muscles are fine," Daniel said slowly. "It's the connection between the brain and the wings that's gone. Like a phone line that's been cut, not just unplugged. I need to build something completely new to bridge that gap." "Is that even possible?" Vera asked. Daniel looked at the sleeping giant beside him, remembering the way its eye had focused on him that very first night, the way its breathing calmed whenever he spoke softly, the low protective growl it had given for his sake alone. "I don't know," Daniel admitted honestly, "but I'm going to try." The trouble started the moment Rask found out what Daniel was planning. "You want to build a new nerve pathway," Rask said flatly, standing in the hangar entrance with two other station officials beside him. "Human, this is not a shuttle engine. You cannot simply wire around a problem this large. The creature's brain structure alone is more complex than most of our own technology." "I've been studying it for weeks," Daniel said, standing his ground. "I know what I'm dealing with now. I can build a bridge that reroutes the signal around the damage. It won't be easy, but it's possible. It is also expensive." One of the officials cut in, a broad-shouldered alien Daniel hadn't met before. "This project has already consumed resources this station cannot continue to justify. The administration has decided. Tomorrow, the disassembly crew begins their work. Whatever state the creature is in, it ends there." Daniel felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his voice steady. "Give me until then. Just one more chance." Rask studied him for a long moment, mandibles clicking softly in thought. Whatever passed through his mind, he didn't share it. "One day, human. No more. And whatever happens, the outcome is yours to answer for." The officials left, and Daniel turned back to the dragon, mind already racing through everything he would need. Vera appeared at his side moments later, having clearly overheard the exchange from where she'd been working nearby. "One day," she said quietly. "That's not enough time." "It'll have to be," Daniel replied, already digging through his tool bag for parts he knew wouldn't be sufficient. "I need materials I don't have. Something flexible enough to carry a signal, but strong enough to survive being inside a living creature's body. Nothing on this station is built for that." Vera hesitated only a moment before making a decision that could clearly cost her far more than Daniel's job was worth to him. "There's a restricted storage section." Old Havenar salvage. Things the station collected decades ago and never cataloged properly because nobody understood what they were for. If there's anything that could help, it would be there. Restricted meaning off limits? Daniel asked. Meaning I could lose my position for taking you there, Vera said simply. But I think this matters more than my position does. They moved quickly, slipping through quiet corridors toward a forgotten section of the station where dust-coated old crates stacked from floor to ceiling. Vera knew exactly where to look, pulling open containers filled with strange materials Daniel had never seen before. Flexible strands of some organic metallic hybrid, faintly warm to the touch, clearly designed for creatures like the dragon rather than ordinary machines. This is it, Daniel said, running the strange material through his fingers, feeling its strength and flexibility at once. This might actually work. They gathered as much as they could carry and returned to the hangar as quickly as possible, Daniel's mind already building the design he would need. Working through the night, he began constructing a synthetic bridge meant to carry signals from the dragon's brain directly to the nerve endings at the base of each wing, bypassing the deliberately destroyed connection entirely. It was delicate, dangerous work. One miscalculation could send an uncontrolled surge through the dragon's nervous system, potentially causing serious harm or worse. Daniel double-checked every connection, testing small currents carefully before committing to anything permanent, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air of the hangar. Vera stayed by his side the entire night, passing him tools, holding steady lights, occasionally reading aloud technical notes from the old Havenar salvage records she had also taken from the restricted storage. Between the two of them, piece by piece, the synthetic bridge began taking shape. As dawn approached on the station's artificial clock, Daniel finally reached the moment he had been dreading. The bridge was built. All that remained was the connection itself, attaching the delicate synthetic pathway directly to the dragon's living nervous system, a procedure with absolutely no room for error. He climbed carefully onto a support platform positioned near the base of the dragon's neck, tools in hand, the massive creature's steady breathing the only sound in the otherwise silent hangar. He looked down at the closed eye nearby, remembering the way it had once focused directly on him. "All right," Daniel said softly, more to the dragon than to himself. "This might hurt a little. I'm sorry about that, but I need you to trust me just a bit longer." He began the procedure, hands steady despite the pressure weighing on him. Minutes stretched into hours as he worked with painstaking precision, connecting each strand of the synthetic bridge to the correct nerve cluster, constantly checking and rechecking his work against the Havenar notes Vera read aloud beside him. At one point, the dragon's body tensed suddenly, a low groan escaping its throat as Daniel made a particularly delicate connection. Daniel froze immediately, heart pounding, afraid he had caused pain or damage. But after a moment, the tension eased, and the creature's breathing steadied once more. "Easy," Daniel whispered. "Almost there." Finally, as the station's artificial morning light began filtering weakly through distant windows, Daniel made the final connection. The synthetic bridge was complete, stretching from the dragon's brain directly to the base of both wings, bypassing the old damage entirely. He climbed down slowly, exhausted, his hands shaking slightly from hours of careful, tense work. Vera watched anxiously beside him as he activated the system for the first time, sending a careful trickle of power through the newly built pathway. Nothing happened. The dragon remained still, its wings limp against its sides just as they had been for generations. Daniel checked his connections again, adjusted the power output slightly, and tried once more. Still nothing. "Maybe it needs time," Vera offered gently, seeing the exhaustion and disappointment on Daniel's face. Daniel nodded slowly, though doubt gnawed at him. He had used every scrap of skill and knowledge he possessed, taken every risk available to him, and still the wings remained still. Behind them, the hangar doors groaned as the disassembly crew arrived early, exactly as promised. "Time," Daniel murmured, staring up at the motionless giant above him, "is the one thing we don't have left." The disassembly crew stood at the hangar entrance, a group of 6 heavily armored Thren workers carrying cutting tools and heavy equipment, waiting for the order to begin. Rask stood among them, his expression unreadable as he watched Daniel standing protectively near the dragon's massive head. "The bridge is built," Daniel said, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. It's connected. It just needs time to work. You were given until this morning, Rask said, not unkindly, but firmly. That time has passed. I am sorry, human. You did more than anyone expected, but the decision has already been made above me. Vera stepped forward beside Daniel, her voice unusually sharp for someone normally so quiet. Give it a few more hours. What difference does that make after all this time? Rask hesitated, clearly torn between the orders he had been given and something else Daniel couldn't quite read in his alien expression. Finally, he raised a hand toward the waiting crew, gesturing for them to hold their position. 1 hour, Rask said quietly. That is the absolute limit of what I can offer, and I will answer for it myself if questioned. Daniel nodded gratefully, turning back toward the dragon immediately. He climbed back onto the support platform near its neck, checking every connection of the synthetic bridge once more, searching for anything he might have missed in his exhaustion the night before. The minutes ticked by in tense silence. Daniel adjusted the power flow slightly, hoping a different balance might trigger some response. Still nothing. He checked each connection point individually, running his fingers along the delicate strands of synthetic material, praying he hadn't made some small, fatal error somewhere along the way. 30 minutes passed, then 40. Daniel felt panic creeping in despite his best efforts to stay calm, aware that his own rising stress might be affecting the very creature he was trying to help, if what Vera had told him about emotional sensitivity was true. He forced himself to take a slow breath, steadying his racing thoughts. He climbed down from the platform and moved to sit directly beside the dragon's massive head instead, placing one hand gently against its cool, plated skin, the way he had done that very first day. I know you're tired, Daniel said softly, ignoring the watching crowd entirely, focused only on the creature in front of him. I know you've been alone a long time, and I know people hurt you badly enough that they made sure you'd never fly again. But I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to give you the choice back. What you do with it after that is up to you. The dragon's breathing remained steady, slow, and even, giving no indication it had hurt him at all. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of failure settling heavily over him despite everything he had tried. 50 minutes passed. The disassembly crew shifted restlessly near the entrance, equipment ready, waiting only for the final word from Rask. Daniel kept his hand pressed gently against the dragon's skin, unwilling to move even as the deadline approached. Then, so faintly he almost missed it entirely, the dragon's breathing changed. Daniel's eyes snapped open. The massive eye beside him, closed for the past hour, began to open slowly, focusing directly on him with unusual clarity, sharper and more alert than it had ever been before. Hey, Daniel whispered, heart pounding. Hey there, can you hear me? The dragon's eye held steady on him, and for the first time, Daniel felt something more than simple recognition passing between them, something closer to understanding. Then, slowly, painfully, one massive wing shifted. It was small at first, barely noticeable, a slight twitch along the joint that had remained motionless for generations. Daniel scrambled backward instinctively, watching in stunned silence as the twitch grew stronger, the ancient joint straining against years of stiffness and disuse. It's moving, Vera breathed from somewhere behind him, her voice barely a whisper. Daniel, it's actually moving. The wing extended slowly outward, unfolding inch by inch, the massive membrane stretching wide as ancient muscles worked for the first time in longer than anyone present had been alive. The sound it made was not smooth or graceful, but rough and creaking, like something enormous waking up after the longest sleep imaginable. The entire hangar fell completely silent. Even the disassembly crew stood frozen at the entrance, tools forgotten in their hands, watching as the second wing began to move as well, unfolding to match its twin, spreading wide across the massive hangar space in a display that hadn't been witnessed in generations. Daniel stood slowly, staring up in complete disbelief as both wings stretched fully outward for the first time, catching the dim orange light of the hangar and casting long shadows across the gathered crowd. The dragon lifted its head higher than Daniel had ever seen it move, testing the new range of motion cautiously, almost as though it couldn't quite believe it either. Then, the creature made a sound Daniel had never heard from it before, not the low protective growl from before, not the exhausted groan of pain during the surgery, but something entirely different. A long, low sound that rumbled through the hangar, deep and resonant, carrying something unmistakably close to relief. Slowly, deliberately, the dragon lowered its massive head toward Daniel, stopping just inches away, its newly opened eye fixed directly on him with unmistakable recognition. Daniel reached out with a trembling hand and gently touched the side of its face, feeling the creature lean slightly into the contact, wings still spread wide behind it, as if testing their own existence. "There you go," Daniel said quietly, voice thick with emotion he hadn't expected to feel. "There you go, big guy. You're not broken. You never were." Behind him, the disassembly crew slowly lowered their tools, and even Rask, normally so composed, stood staring in open amazement at the impossible sight before him. Word of what happened in the hangar spread across Gorin Station within hours, and by the next day, it had traveled far beyond it. Trade ships passing through carried the story to other outposts, other stations, other corners of space where people had long assumed the dragons of the Havinar were nothing more than dead legends locked away in scrapyards. A human mechanic, they said, had done what an entire species of engineers had believed impossible. The station administration, once eager to melt the creature down for parts, suddenly found themselves with something far more valuable than scrap metal. Officials who had barely acknowledged Daniel's existence during his weeks of work now requested meetings, eager to understand what exactly had been accomplished and what it might mean for the station's future. Rask, to his credit, didn't pretend the change of heart was his own idea. When station leadership arrived to inspect the hangar personally, he stood beside Daniel rather than in front of him, mandibles clicking evenly as he explained what he had witnessed with his own eyes. "The human did what our scanners could not," Rask told the assembled officials plainly. "He saw something we overlooked entirely. Whatever value this creature holds now, it exists because he refused to give up when the rest of us already had." Daniel, standing nearby with dried grease still on his hands from another morning of adjustments and care, felt strangely uncomfortable with the sudden attention. He hadn't done any of it for recognition. He'd done it because something in him refused to look at a living creature, however strange or ancient, and call it scrap without at least trying to help it first. Over the following weeks, the dragon's recovery continued steadily. With both wings now functional, Daniel worked carefully to strengthen the ancient muscles through slow, controlled movement, always mindful not to push too quickly after so many years of stillness. Vera remained by his side throughout, her official duties on the station quietly adjusted so she could continue assisting with what had become the most important project Gorin Station had ever hosted. The dragon, for its part, seemed to understand exactly what was happening. It cooperated patiently with each exercise, extending and folding its wings under Daniel's careful guidance, testing new ranges of motion day by day. Its eyes, once dull and lifeless, now tracked Daniel's movements constantly whenever he was nearby, following him with an attentiveness that spoke of genuine trust rather than simple programming. One afternoon, several weeks after the wings had first moved, Daniel decided it was time for a bigger test. He led the dragon out of the hangar for the first time, through the station's largest cargo bay doors, into the open landing area beyond. The creature moved carefully on legs that hadn't supported its full weight in generations, testing each step with obvious caution, but growing steadier with every movement. A crowd had gathered to watch, word having spread quickly once again that something significant was about to happen. Daniel stood beside the dragon's front leg, one hand resting gently against its plated skin, feeling the nervous energy radiating from the creature beside him. "Whenever you're ready," Daniel said quietly, loud enough only for the dragon to hear. "No pressure. Just see how it feels." The dragon lifted its head high, wings extending fully outward on either side, casting long shadows across the landing area beneath the pale light of the station's artificial sun. For a moment, nothing happened, the creature simply testing the stretch and pull of muscles working together. Then, with a powerful downward beat that sent dust and loose debris scattering across the landing area, the dragon lifted off the ground. Gasps rippled through the gathered crowd as the massive creature rose steadily into the air, wings beating in slow, powerful strokes, each movement growing more confident than the last. It climbed higher, circling once above the landing area, its long shadow sweeping across the astonished onlookers below. Daniel stood watching from the ground, head tilted back, a wide smile breaking across his tired face as he watched the creature he had spent weeks fighting to save finally soaring freely through open air for the first time in generations. Beside him, Vera laughed in pure delight, clapping her hands together as the dragon banked gracefully overhead. "Look at it," she said, voice full of wonder. "Daniel, look at what you did." "What we did," Daniel corrected gently, still watching the sky above. "I couldn't have gotten anywhere close without your help." The dragon circled the landing area once more before descending slowly, landing with surprising grace despite its massive size directly in front of Daniel. It lowered its head immediately, nudging gently against his shoulder in a gesture that needed no translation device to understand. Daniel reached up and placed both hands against the side of its face, feeling the warmth beneath its plated skin, remembering the faint pulse he had first detected weeks ago when everyone else had already given up. What had once been dismissed as scrap now stood before him, wings folded neatly at its sides, very much alive and very much free. In the days that followed, Gorin Station became known throughout the region not as a forgotten scrapyard at the edge of nowhere, but as the place where a human mechanic and an ancient dragon had proven that nothing was truly beyond saving, given enough patience, enough care, and enough stubborn refusal to give up. Daniel eventually received offers from other stations, other outposts, all hoping he might work similar wonders on their own broken machines and forgotten creatures. He considered each offer carefully, but found himself, more often than not, staying close to Gorin Station instead, continuing his work alongside Vera and the dragon that had once been written off as nothing more than dead weight taking up space. Sometimes, in quiet moments after a long day's work, Daniel would sit beside the dragon in the open landing area, watching the stars beyond the station's edge, thinking about all the other broken, forgotten things scattered across the galaxy, waiting for someone who simply refused to see them as scrap. There were, he suspected, many more stories like this one still waiting to be found.